A very warm welcome.
To all our friends from across the world on this historic occasion when we are launching SAMAS, the coming together of SAGE Singapore, Maadhyam India, and STRAUS from the United States. On a day when the United States turns a new page in the history of its democracy, Singapore already having turned that page in September this year with the coming into effect of the Singapore Convention. And hopefully, India will soon turn its own page with the coming into effect of our much awaited new law on mediation. We are indeed privileged to have with us, presiding over this launch, Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul, Judge, Supreme Court of India, whose commitment to mediation is legendary and who is always ready to don the gown of a counsel when it comes to the cause of mediation. We have the honor of having three accomplished leaders of mediation from Singapore, India, and the United States, who will also sign the Memorandum of Understanding today on behalf of their respective organizations. And they are Mr. Amarjit Singh Chandiok, Senior Advocate, former Additional Solicitor General of India, President of Maadhyam, who has led the mediation movement in India on behalf of the bar for the last 15 years. Mr. Aloysius Go, CEO and founder of SAGE Mediation, senior faculty at the Singapore Mediation Center, and founding chairman of Peacemakers Conference. Professor Dr. Sukhsimranjit Singh, Judge Danny Weinstein, Managing Director of the STRAUS Institute for Dispute Resolution, Pepperdine University. I also welcome my colleague and dear friend, JP Singh, who will moderate today's discussion with me. Justice Kaul, may we request you to please chair today's proceedings and begin by asking you, how do you view these three nations coming together with one global vision for conflict resolution?
Sarna, if you look at a world scenario and a phase which we are entering post-pandemic, I think, which will arise next year, the need for mediation and the need for collaboration across the world becomes even more necessary. So the collaborative effort, which is the very base of mediation, people are talking about today, starting from how to deal with COVID. So you're talking about vaccines being developed in one part of the world, how it will be spread to another part of the world. You're talking about prioritization. You're saying how the manufacturing will be one place or the scientific development in another place. So what is ultimately mediation? Mediation is only a collaborative effort to find a central path for them. So I think this COVID situation should have taught the world the importance of moving together. Now that works from a larger plane country-wise to a lesser plane to within the country to even a lesser plane of individuals. And I think it's a great effort of all three of you to set forth this collaborative effort, because my experience of having been in the US and seeing how it is, it's been the crucible of mediation and how it has dealt with litigation. Singapore has been a great example of how to set forth arbitration and mediation centers and make it a focus from an Asian point of view. And Maadhyam has been set up here in India to start from where it began, and help in spreading mediation through the country as a private enterprise, apart from the support of the government system. So apart from the court annexed mediation, and it is the next step of starting it in this fashion. Interestingly, in Indian context, the people who have set it up are the people who also put forth the scheme of the court annexed mediation in Delhi. And I'm very happy that there is a step forward. I do believe very strongly that in times to come, as has happened in the US, where a very large percentage of cases get settled rather than litigated. We will have to move towards it. And if this 7-8 months time in India, Indian perspective, has taught people to think in this direction, I think a purpose would have been served.
Thank you. I think you really set the ball rolling, Justice Call, with the holistic view that you have presented to us. And we will, in the course of today's discussion, build on that. Thank you so much.
Mr. Aloysius Go, you are referred to as a man with a Midas touch. If you had not taken to mediation so passionately, you could have been a monk. Now, what does this MOU mean to you?
That was an interesting twist, and well, firstly, again, good morning and good evening to everyone joining us from around the world, and thank you, JP and Sadhana, for the very kind introductions. Well, I don't know about the Midas touch. This MOU, this collaboration, has something which we have been anticipating for a long time. You know, and that we are signing this today in actually very strange, very challenging circumstances is first and foremost a demonstration of the power of the mediation spirit. And the second thing to me is that this is a great shout out to friendship. And I think more than ever, mediators need friends who will speak truth to us and challenge us to make small ideas into great realities, and really in the amazing leaders of STRAUS and in Maadhyam, I have found such friends to challenge, and I'm greatly honored by the friendship. I think this MOU is, I think Justice Call has said it, it's really showcasing how we all as mediators need to tap on our creative ability to collaborate and to continue to foster a common vision that is not going to be inhibited in its growth by illness, by travel restrictions, or by time differences. We are above all this. And as Justice Call has said, in this year, the pandemic has very much highlighted the polarization of the world. You know, there's been nations, religions, generations that who have drifted apart, and the gaps are seen in access to technology, access to finance, access to healthcare, and sadly even access to justice. Mediators, I feel, are now called to recognize the power and the responsibility we hold to bridge these gaps, and there is no better testament of our embrace of this responsibility than the fact that we are making effort to get this MOU going, even if we cannot be physically with each other. And we are, I mean, we have discussed this a long time. I'm extremely excited about the plans that SAMAS, the name of this collaboration, has in the coming years, from joint education to referring of mediators to each other, and to create a protocol for excellence. There are so many things that we are going to be doing together. It's very exciting. Yeah.
Thank you, Aloysius. I'm sure your message is loud and clear. Thank you so much.
Maybe come to Mr. Chandiok now. Sir, in view of India having signed the Singapore Convention, though we haven't ratified it, and in view of the much awaited proposed new legislation in India on mediation, how do you see the mediation landscape changing India's international business relations?
Sadhana, I wanted to make a correction to what you said in your opening remarks, to say that India would start its new chapter after it brings the legislation. To me, the constitution begins with the word "we the people." So the "we the people" at Maadhyam have started that chapter today by giving this collaboration between United States on one hand and Singapore on the other. And therefore, a new chapter has been already unfolded today by Maadhyam on behalf of we the people of this country. And we the people of this country believe in jointness, we believe in togetherness, we believe that we should together as a democratic setup look at others to learn from them and of course teach them too. This new trends after Singapore Convention are many fold. I've seen situations changing today. I found during COVID going on, where insolvency was stopped, for example, I've done 6 matters myself in resolving those matters, though under a restructuring plan. Now, those are instances that are coming to us, which will help us to collaborate, learn from Sukhsimran, learn from Aloysius. They have, as Justice Paul has rightly said, we'll get to know how we educate our mediators better. Sukhsimran will give us those leadership qualities, will give us the substance to it. Aloysius has given us an example how Singapore has established such a big center. And I don't mean any disrespect to anybody, but I'm sure if we have beaten as a good jurisdiction of Singapore in 2018 in insolvency, time has come when this collaborative effort will bring India to the forefront of international mediation. And you will find India participating in international mediations in a big way, both under treaty and non-treaty jurisdiction, private disputes, joint ventures, everywhere. And I think chapter for that, the opening of that has been made today. That's what is going to happen tomorrow.
Yes, sir. India's business relations truly, in view of what you say, look like they are going to go hand in hand with international mediation as far as we are concerned here in India. Thank you very much, sir. And yes, you are right in correcting me that we really start our new page today with this collaboration, and the legislation will be the next step.
If all of you have been active on social media, Professor Sukhsimranjit Singh cannot be missed. With his effervescent smile and immaculate oratory skills while giving lessons on cross-cultural and faith-based mediations. Sukhsimran, the question to you. The STRAUS Institute for Dispute Resolution has been a top-ranking dispute resolution program in the United States, excuse me, for over 15 years now. How do you think this collaboration will help STRAUS in expanding its boundaries?
Thank you, JP sir, for that question. I want to quickly thank Justice Call for being here and his presence. Mr. Chandeok sir, who's been a leader and an amazing mentor to me to be here. Sadhana ji, thank you for leading this initiative. And my good friend and buddy, Aloysius from Singapore. So it's a good question in terms of where do STRAUS Institute walk in? How can we help? Why are we collaborating? Allow me to share with you 3 or 4 ideas, and my answer is within those ideas. Let me start by saying that the very word idea is critical. So we believe in sharing ideas. Thought leaders like my predecessor, the previous managing director, Professor Peter Robinson, my colleague like Professor Tom Stepanovich, we're all about leadership during difficult times. I've seen them. I believe that current times in the world, the social, political, economic conditions and issues we are facing together as a civilization with big C, it gives us a unique opportunity that is unprecedented. Number 2, sir, we believe in changing lives one step at a time. The collaboration between Maadhyam, SAGE, and STRAUS will change lives one step at a time. Mediation has that potential. India has that potential. Singapore has that potential. US has the potential. The world needs to see a cross-cultural, international, interdisciplinary collaboration. Third, I think dispute resolution is a revolution. When I entered the field, to be very honest with all of you, 16 years ago, I was told, don't invest too much time in it. It will fade away. ADR or mediation is a short-term thing. By 2010, it'll be gone. Today, the field is bigger than we can all expect or were expecting it to be. Through my own travels or connections in Japan, Brazil, throughout Europe, Latin America, New Zealand, Australia, and throughout 35 states that I've traveled in the US, I can tell you the field is expanding. As Justice Call rightly mentioned, mediation is treated with deep respect in the developed countries, and we can shift that focus in other countries as well. Sir, my last point, institutions are as solid as the people who lead such institutions. This collaboration is prestigious to us, first of all, because of the people who are behind the institutions who are being led. I've already spoken briefly about Mr. Chandeok, sir. I'm amazed every time I hear him speak by his grace and humility, despite his unmatchable wisdom. By you, sir, JP, sir, and I've seen you, I've met your son, and I've known you have a cross-cultural expertise. By being India's senior Supreme Court attorney, by Sadhana ji, who is always graceful in hospitality, in her kindness, in her passion for mediation. And by my proud and good friend, Mr. Aloysius Go, who at a young age is leading a terrific institution in Singapore, and he believes in this movement. So I can't be more proud to belong to all of you. And if we have the blessings and presence of judges and senior thinkers and thought leaders like Justice Call, I don't think we can fail. We can only succeed. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sukhsimran. You lead by example. And so far as the youth brigade is concerned, I'm sure you still lead the youth brigade. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chandeok, you have been so motivating about the role of India in future in mediation, following our signing the Singapore Convention and our new legislation being awaited. I would like to ask you, how do you see Maadhyam's role and India's role through Maadhyam in this international collaboration?
Well, I think Maadhyam, the people behind Maadhyam, to borrow Justice Call's word, set up the mediation movement from New Delhi, the capital of India, way back in 2006. And we all today know there is not a single mediation center in the world, if I can say that with sense of pride, where you get 60 matters listed every day for mediation. And I must say, this has been possible because of the collaborative effort of people that were there and honorable judges, justice like Justice Call. I mean, I don't forget those days when we were assigned the job that one day Justice Call himself, Lordship, would go to the see how mediation is moving on. Justice Sikri would move, Justice Sareen would go. We will all go. Therefore, we started from there. So Maadhyam has always been, or the people behind Maadhyam is a name. It's the people, as I think Sukhsimran rightly said, people that matter. So the people who are behind Maadhyam today were the people who have carried this movement from 2006 to 2020. And that is where you're seeing the mediation movement in this country. And with Singapore Convention and with today's SAMAS collaboration between US on one hand and Singapore on the other, Maadhyam is actually giving a gateway to India to play its role that predominantly is going to play in times to come in the mediation and ODRs. And I think yesterday's seminar, where Justice Call unfolded what should be a role of an arbitration council for exactly, would even apply to a mediation council once the legislation comes in. And you will see how centers get created. And there I see Maadhyam's role to be playing. And we all know, we have already collaborated with Bar Council of Bar Association of India. We have already started a building which is almost nearing completion. I'm expecting, but for COVID, sometime in January, we should be able to inaugurate it, which will have a center for ODR and mediation centers. We are already creating a platform through Maadhyam to see how we can bring online mediation into position. We have already settled with respect to the BRICS countries And that's what I was telling Subsimran today, that from BRICS countries, we have participants today in this function today, after they came to know that Maadhyam was looking at this collaborative effort. Therefore, India through Maadhyam is going to play a big role in the international relationships, in relation to resolution of disputes. And I'm sure Maadhyam would be able to get lending hands from all mediators of this country, to which I appeal today again. And we shall all together take this movement right from moon till the ocean. That's the dream that we at Maadhyam have. And I'm sure we will fulfill this dream in times to come.
Thank you, sir. As we can all see that your leadership at the bar and Justice Call's leadership from the bench, really you have been the two people, the movers and the shakers behind the mediation movement in India. And hearing both of you speak today, I think we are really excited about the possibilities that Maadhyam can bring to the role of India in international mediation and also domestic mediation, with the help of all our friends in India who are mediators, mediation organizations. So we are really so proud of Justice Call and you, sir.
Justice Call, taking the story of leadership ahead, you have been associated very proactively with the mediation movement in India for nearly 15 years now. In fact, you have led it from the side of the judiciary. What, according to you, were the defining moments in the evolution of mediation in India? And according to you, has the Singapore Convention brought a paradigm shift?
GP, I believe every new idea, every change of status quo creates an opposition because people don't want a change. It's an inherent human nature. And but there is always a time for everything. And if I look back to where it began, I think the defining moment from the Delhi and from there, I would say the Indian context was when, after the initial opposition by the members of the bar, it was some kind of unknown thing. It was said, look, this is going to deprive lawyers of their work. Appeal was being made by the then Chief Justice for giving it a chance and saying it will be a collaborative effort with the lawyers. And Mr. Chandyok was the president of the High Court Bar, and it was made from a podium, and he came forward and said that we are always willing for a collaborative effort. And a chapter began where the mediation was not confined to centric to the judges, but centric to the lawyers. I think that was, to my mind, a defining moment in starting the whole process. So we began with the effort of seeing that the lawyers themselves carry forward the moment, with the judges playing a back role kind of a thing, supervisory kind of a role, yet trying to establish its credibility as a movement, because in the litigants' mind, initially, they could not understand how could lawyers settle disputes, because the mindset was of judges settling dispute. So that was the changeover, I think, time. And from there, it spread. And then we have, all of us have, I think, defended the concept of mediation headed by lawyers, headed by private mediators. And as the movement grew, the question was of bringing certain principles and norms into place. In that sense, I think the Singapore Convention has been a paradigm shift. India has been, at that stage, was debating whether to be part of it. And I think the fact that a political decision was taken to move forward and make sure that we are part of it carried a great significance. This significance, I think, is to be appreciated in the context of what has flowed into India after that. For the first time, it was thought that instead of having some kind of a mediation clauses in different acts and doing so, the thought process of being in conformity with the International Convention and laying the foundation for legislation dealing only with mediation took place. And that change of thought process, again, was a paradigm shift, I think, starting from the Singapore Convention. And today, just to inform people, if they are not informed, I would say the participants, the Supreme Court Mediation Committee took an initiative to set up a committee of mediators in India across the country to propose and assist the government by sending a draft legislation. And there have been collaborative exercises in this from both the US and Singaporeans to some extent. And that has been forwarded. And as I'm informed, it is receiving attention at the highest level to say what kind of legislation can be brought in. So the next shift in the Indian context, I think, is going to be as and when we are able to get a central legislation on mediation, which naturally will be in conformity with the Singapore Convention. I think that's going to be the next stage, and I'm very confident that it will shift the whole focus and the whole principle of mediation to a next level from where it is today.
Thank you, Justice Kaul. The push given by you to the mediation movement, we all remember. Not only you donned the gown of a counsel, you have also donned gloves for the bar whenever it was required. So we will never forget your contribution to this. Thank you so much.
Aloysius, you are leading an exciting group of people in Singapore who are so invested in mediation. But I'm sure in your work, you've seen the challenges for international mediators today. We'd like you to just talk a little bit about what are the challenges for international mediators today, and how do you see this MOU overcoming those challenges?
So I think with the signing of the Singapore Convention and it's coming into force this September, there will hopefully be less and less questions about the enforceability of the mediated settlement agreement for international commercial disputes. I think the reality, however, is that typical of international treaties, the drafters of the convention have avoided going into too much detail on the process and requirements for enforcement. You know, and I can imagine that the intention was to preserve some amount of wriggle room, some flexibility, and hopefully that will encourage more jurisdictions to sign on to the convention and get it ratified. But I mean, we have also heard, I have been in active dialogue with Europe, with Australia, with Japan, and there is a lot of concern that the absence of clear guidance in the convention has meant that even if there are public policy makers, there are mediators and courts who are supportive, they have struggled to convince other decision makers to sign on to the convention and struggled to draft the legislation needed to ratify the convention. So it is not an easy task. And I think for the rest of us, one of the challenges that we need to avoid, and that I've been trying to encourage all my fellow mediators around the world to avoid, is there's no need to be defensive about how much improvement there needs to be in the convention or in legislation. There's probably a lot of improvement, not probably, definitely a lot of improvement that we need in our own practice. And the greatest challenge and enemy of all mediators will always be complacency and the human ego. The full potential of mediation and the convention is really not sufficiently examined and exercised yet. And I think that's it. Even as we are self-critical, we also need to be steadfast in defending some of the fundamental principles of what is ethical mediator conduct. And I think from last year, some of you were here, a lot of my own guides, my own teachers in mediation had started framing for me when I started SAGE that this is really a time when the real battle for the soul of mediation really begins. You know, because mediation is not just a process. It is the people, it is the mindset, it is the discipline. And we have already seen it in Singapore and India, all over the world. 1 year from the signing of the convention, there's been a more than doubling, tripling of new mediation entities, people wanting to be mediators, and it's a good thing. I am right now actually helping a group of young people. I will ask them to come out to say hi. They're all hiding in a room next door, planning for a mediation competition. And you know, it's great to see this excitement in the youth about mediation, which wasn't there a few years ago. But this interest is double-edged, and there are many people who I've also encountered who are now trying to enter the field of mediation with self-interested and profiteering mindsets, or maybe just not being thoughtful enough. I mean, and I guess you guys encounter this as well. People who say, look, how difficult is it to be a mediator? I just need 6 hours of training. Can you tell me over 2 hours how to be accredited as a mediator? And you know, it's if we overindulge and don't defend what it is to be a good mediator, it will retard the progress of the mediation profession. I think this MOU is here so that we work together to foster an open and discerning mind, to encourage continual learning with a great institution like STRAUS, with wisdom in Maadhyam, that we challenge each other to regularly examine our progress and to put forth a narrative of what we believe to be true with a capital T to mediation, and to be uncompromising in this, right? And I think we've already seen it. With this year has been a time where I have seen Suk Simranjit's teaching. He pivoted very quickly to online teaching so that we don't stop putting out that narrative. Let me welcome my youngest, Gege. My youngest member of the mediation fraternity. So yes. Hi, hello everybody.
Hello.
This is Gareth, right? So he's helping out now, and actually I got a good bunch helping me to take care of him. But yeah, I mean, this is why this MOU is important, because of the next generation.
Well,
thank you.
Very, very well said, Aloysius. Your little one sure is the symbol of things to come. And I mean, how beautifully you have really put this, the simplicity of the Singapore Convention is also its challenge. And so, like no constitution is perfect, or no document is perfect, no document can really be implemented without the people behind the document. And you're so right that ultimately the ethical values that we hope SAMAS will retain and maintain from today, those ethical values will really guide our three nations and our three organizations in the way ahead. Thank you, Aloysius.
Suk Simranjit Singh, you know, Aloysius has already laid the basis for the achievements of STRAUS. STRAUS has already reached the pinnacle in the field of dispute resolution, and your contribution has also been well documented. Please tell us, how do we work on creating meaningful and successful international mediations? And as we enter 2021, where do you see the greatest need for work in this regard?
Very good question, Mr. JP Singh. I think first we need to trust mediation. We need to bring stakeholders in the process of mediation, that we can create that trust and evolve that trust. We need to involve, like my colleague Aloysius was telling us, young, competent, and diverse mediators. We should not forget the whole fact of cross-cultural international mediation, thanks to Singapore Convention or otherwise, is that mediation is practiced differently in different cultures and different traditions. And we should not lose that. We should embrace that. Competence, we have to think about competence. How do we become more competent? And how do we make sure the crop of mediators involved in today's mediation trainings and practices are competent? And again, we have to work on that across different cultures and collaboratively through collaborations like this one that I'm very proud of we're entering into, SAMAS. Third, I think we need to trust Singapore Convention. We need to trust Convention and each other as thought leaders. Yes, there are issues with the Convention. No document ever that human has created is always perfect. But let's start with that. Let's trust it and see how far we can go. Fourth, I think let's not reinvent the wheel when it comes to what is mediation, how do we resolve mediation, what is quote connected mediation, what is mandatory mediation, what is mediator's proposal, how do you break an impasse, what is cross-cultural mediation, how do you involve attorneys, how do you control attorneys, how do you control emotions, how do you tackle a difficult party. These topics have been tackled by scholars and practitioners over the last 30, 40 years around the globe. And there's a very important literature, there is very important wisdom, there is very important publications that are out there. Do not ignore it. We should not start from scratch. Let's embrace it, learn from it. And then, my last point, let's see how the Eastern wisdom inculcates some of it, but enhances it. What can we learn from India that can enhance what the West has produced, what Singapore is trying to produce? How do we create competencies that are cross-culturally viable and needed and appreciated? And how do we grow this international thinking that I'm talking about together? Not alone, not in our own silos in our offices with our banner, with my big name. No, no, together. Because it is together that we can help the cause of mediation. We have spent enough years fighting alone. Let's work together and see what we can do together. So I hope some of these thoughts were helpful, but I want to quickly make last comment about what Aloysius said, which was powerful, about somebody needing 2 hours of mediation training and saying, make me competent. There's a lot of depth in that point. I think that also applies to understanding culture, understanding cross-cultural competencies, and also understanding international mediation framework. It is complex, it is multifaceted, it will take our time, our attention, and it will take someone months, perhaps years of work and training and hard work. There is no easy way out. So I hope these comments were helpful. Thank you for the question, Mr. JP Singh.
Thank you, Sukhsimran. You know, somebody said, if you want to go fast, you walk alone. And if you want to go far, you travel together. And you just now said, now for you and for all of us, now this collaboration is a big step. And soon we will reap the results of this synthesis of East and West. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Justice Call, now based on what Sukhsimran and Aloysius have raised, quite rightly, as Sukhsimran said, it's powerful. It's so important to have the right competencies, and to flag those and underline those competencies is crucial today. We believe, Justice Call, that you are perhaps the most trained mediator than all mediators we know, because it's been 15 years that you have perhaps not left any training program that was conducted by the Delhi High Court. You attended each one of them. And with that background, you've seen mediations being conducted all over the world in many nations. So the question that I think is important that arises from what both Aloysius and Sukhsimran have said, do you think we require legally enforceable standards of practice and eligibility to serve as mediators across the world?
Sadhana, see, Dr. Sukhsimranjit Singh just now mentioned the fact that there are various cultures all over the world. Okay. So yes, there will be some core issues which will be centric to it. some core norms will be centric to it. But I think it's going to be difficult to lay down a uniform practice because each culture will require its own, development process. So I have always held the faith, not now, but from times when I was a lawyer, that litigation was a process to bring the other side onto the table, more so in the Indian context, when I saw the time periods. I used to think, put enough pressure to get somebody on the table and then the iron is hot, strike a deal. That's the best way to end a dispute. I did not know about mediation at that time. This was the perception I had. And possibly the introduction to mediation, I saw how it works in different countries. So we got an opportunity under the exchange program to travel to the US, East Coast to West Coast, went to mediation center, went to court to see how mediation was working, came to England to see how mediation was working, went to Singapore to see how mediation was working. So 3 countries apart from India where the mediation movement has taken off, I would say, and has played an important role, one was able to see. Each had a certain common nuances, but each had a different nuance to it of working also. So can you deal with, let me take an illustration. Can you deal with a family matrimonial litigation in the same manner as you deal in the US and India? No. Because in the US, the concerned people were with 2 people. You are settling the dispute between 2 people. You have worked with a lot of family mediation. You must have seen that the family mediation will succeed only if there are so many other possibilities and persons involved in it. So the family members come into it. So the orientation of the family comes into it. Similarly, business disputes. India has a lot of family-held businesses, different from a US concept. Possibly some of the European countries may have that benefit. So you have to rope in the larger issues of the family into it to protect what each of them feels is a protected field. Now, therefore, norms, yes. Singapore Convention, yes. But you can't say that the working will be uniform in everywhere. And that's where the collaborative effort will be required. Some particulars, some generals is what I would say.
I think, yes, you raised a very, very vital aspect of mediation, just at a time when we in India are talking about Indianizing mediation. And that's exactly what we've been discussing. International norms, yes. Singapore Convention, yes. But time has come now for us to Indianize mediation in many, many ways. So thank you so much, Justice Kaul, for that response.
Mr. Chandyo, I want to bring you back to our domestic landscape, a question which has plagued countries all over the globe. Will the Singapore Convention change the status of domestic mediations in India? If so, how? Do you think the proposed new legislation will make it mandatory for the government to participate in mediation?
Well, JP, I had said that earlier also to say that the government to participate in mediation, if it becomes mandatory that we are proposing, if the legislation proposes that you must have at least 1 or 2 sessions in mediation before you knock the court of the door, then obviously in that mediation, the government will have to participate. But as I believe, we today at Maadhyam and with SAMAS now, I think we have gone into an insight which many others do not have, and I'm talking about government here, not anybody else. That's why I feel that this SAMAS is going to be a leader, because it has gone into this question. So we need to also look at how do we bring this awareness program within the government to motivate the government to see what are the benefits, what are the benefits with respect to going into mediation, how much cost, time, energy of the government and the public money they're going to save with it. In fact, if you remember, the Attorney General for India the other day had said that mediators must be paid very well, like lawyers are being paid. And I had said, sir, there needs to be an amendment to it, because we certainly need money. We are not saying we don't need money to take the movement forward. But for us, the leadership at India within the domestic forum is a mission. We have started right from schools now, Maadhyam, and gone right up to the universities. apart from making mediators and lawyers and other professionals. We are now moving towards other professions to see. In fact, your yesterday's program, we had people who were professors, people who are chartered accountants, company secretaries, and lawyers, of course. Therefore, if we are expanding that field, then the fact that the domestic law must conform to, at least borrow from Singapore Convention, that it should also make mediation settlements enforceable like a decree of the court, that will be a big change, that you need not even spend that 2.75 court fees in Delhi and file a petition before the court to bring it on court record. Therefore, it is time that India would have to look at it. It's time that the leadership would be provided. And I'm sure this call has already made it a point, it's being considered at the very highest level. I'm expecting an ordinance. If not, the winter session will have the legislation through. And I'm sure the thinkers, after all, the committee made a recommendation which said it should be mandatory for every litigant, whether you go to a tribunal or to an authority or to a court, to first try mediation. If that is sustained, I'm sure the Honorable Supreme Court has just sustained it. And if that is sustained by the government, I find the change will come because the legislation is by the government. So the government should be motivated by that to look into that part and see how we can utilize this new setup that is coming up. Various culture. What are we getting by this, Samas? We are actually getting something from Sukh Simran, what we will probably not get ordinarily in this country. We'll get from Aloysius his vast experience of how do we resolve international disputes and borrow those principles. I think Sukh Simran made a question of cultural. Here from north, why God north? Go 10 kilometers one side, there's a Rajasthan, which is a different culture. Go the other side, Punjab is a different culture. Go to the UP, it has a different culture. The clothes change, the systems change. In fact, I didn't know that today there was also a work in UP. Somebody told me this morning when I was talking to the person concerned. He says, no, I'm on a fast today. So I didn't know, I couldn't still understand what the fast. So therefore, we have already got cultural differences between us. But as Justice Kaul has rightly said, these are structures that are foundations for us to move. These foundations will get those leverages, flexibility to adopt when it comes to North, when it goes to Punjab, when it goes to UP, when it even goes to internationally. So the landscape is going to be different. And that's why we have been saying at Maadhyam, in fact, I've been requesting that from all of you have been requesting that time has come, all mediators in India must join hands. Forget whether it is A or B. We are all for a common cause, and that cause is the resolution of conflicts. If that cause is to be achieved, if that goal is common between us, I find no reason. We should all dissolve our entities. Let it be mediator as an entity and let move forward to it, because that will help us to bring harmony. Conflicts are increasing every day, every day. In fact, a dispute has been referred to me last night by RWA, where the RWA decided that I should not allow anybody to burn crackers or put something else in the colony. And instead it has decided that everybody will adopt a tree and make that tree as a symbol for celebration, decorate it except for diyas. So some people have objected to it to say, how do you do that? It's my right to put everything on. So therefore these are conflicts. And that's why you all know we have started a community center, but for COVID. And a defense colony has a unique situation where we are in two mandirs and a gurdwara at the same place. Different cultures, different religions between Sanatan Dharma and Arya Samaj. And I have a mosque which is not very far from there. And the RWA is just a stone's throw. So if that community center comes up and starts functioning post-COVID, I hope this situation improves in January or whatever it is. Therefore, that will be the place where your foundation would be what we have in mediation principles. We learn now from Singapore Convention. Nothing can be static. Law can never be static. So it's also a legislation. In that sense, a convention is ultimately ratified into a legislation only. So as we go by, I'm sure we'll learn more. As we go by, the leadership is going to provide something better. And this leadership of Samas is going to lead this country into see that in time for the next generation. In fact, we have already decided that there should be a youth forum within mediation, a youth forum of younger mediators who will then look at how do we look at the conflicts of youngsters and bring them to fore. That is where we think we need to reform them. And all this, what we see from Sushant situation till we went into NCP everywhere, all that will get resolved. The process would be, how do we sit down to bring that foundation of mediation into flexibility, into changing the norms, and see how this country can progress. Because I have no doubt, and I think leadership under what it reminded me today of Justice Call when we was at India International Center, India Habitat Center, and question was raised by the Chief Justice, why are you making payment? And his Lordship said, you please keep sitting, I'll do that. And Lordship took, as if I reminded me of good old days when his Lordship was a lawyer with us, to say he had taken a paper and made those points and made, why do we do this? Why do we make this little stipend to it? Therefore, this was a learning process. We have learned a lot. We have been taught a lot. And I think, as Sadhguru says, we at Maadhyam, we with Sukhsimran, we with Aloysius, we together have an insight which others don't have. And that is why we shall be the true leaders of this country in times to come.
JP, just one addition I want to the original question. See, I have one caveat which is arising, where the government mediation role is concerned. I feel if the government mediation has to work even with the legislation, they must put in place a system of an independent body within the government, which will take the decision to settle. My little apprehension I must express is that if it is left to the bureaucracy to settle, we will go through a motion of settlement, but will not get a settlement in the Indian context. And therefore, there should be a small committee of independent people who will take the ultimate call to settle the disputes. This is something which I have mentioned to concerned people also. That's the way in which the government can settle disputes. Otherwise, they'll go from the lowest court to the highest court as they go now.
Yes, it's called, you're right. It's always the fear of the CVC and the CBI.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Which prevents any officer from taking a decision.
Absolutely.
And as Sir puts it, sir, government is a party in nearly 60% litigation in court.
Yes.
So I hope we realize this dream of bringing government on the negotiating table soon. Thank you so much, sir.
Sukhsimran, taking the cue from JP's question to Mr. Chandyok and his response on the point of the government, and Justice Kaul, knowing the government as well as he does, the caveat that he raised, a related question to you. You specialize in difficult matters that span from government to international private sector. How do you think their identities, whether it's the government or the private sector, how do you think their identities have shaped their conflicts?
Thank you, Sadhanaji. That's a deep question. Let me try to answer in a few minutes if I can. First of all, let's use the word identity. Let's borrow the word identity and see what identity is. We all have it. We in fact have multiple identities. Institutions like government have a strong identity. That's why government of India is different than, let's say, government of US. But the governments themselves morph into a new identity under new leadership. So I have few hopes. I hope we as civilization have become more sophisticated as a society as we tackle more problems or difficult problems. I hope we are more aware of us versus them narrative that is constantly bombarded at us by different sources. I hope you're learning that many of us were born in privilege or power, and that power is different than the power that we earn. I hope we are learning that corruption is weakening us and not strengthening us. So I'm giving you indirect hints on government with my answer. But to me, ma'am, culture is very complex. And I've been studying this topic as I'm in love with this topic for many years, more than a decade. And I've written on it and I've spoken about it. I've given TED Talks on it. And I can tell you a couple of things. Number one, conflicts across cultures are unique because there's more chance for misunderstanding and there's a role played by identity. Such misunderstanding often leads to judgment or our error in attributing an intention to others. We think we know when somebody thinks something, We don't usually say, oh, he may be wrong. Now, all of us know our minds are beautiful. Cultures are beautiful. Imagine India for a second without a culture or without many cultures. Imagine USA without the two parties that had elections today. Imagine there was one party. So differences are going to stay there. They have always been there. The question is, how do we manage these core differences based on identity? And to me, identity is something that goes to your value system, that goes to deep within you in terms of thinking. Last couple of points. The fact of the matter is that we have come on to this thinking. As human beings, we have evolved this thinking, and we have come up to what we call thinking fast. Now, thinking fast is both good and bad. The good is it helped us save our species. If we were not thinking fast, we will be dead. It's also bad because we still love to think fast. It creates a single story of people. So if I say India is one culture, we ignore 200 different languages and dialects, we ignore 28 different food patterns and different dresses, different colors of turbans, different saris. We are missing a lot. So lastly, when people are in conflict, I think they choose unconsciously, subconsciously to be closer to their identity because the identity gives them comfort. Because a lot is happening within them. The conflict is producing them to be challenged. When you are challenged, as Justice Call used a wonderful word, status quo. Justice Call said, we don't like to change our status quo. We don't like to challenge it. And that's exactly where things are. In our status quo, we are a lazy species. We don't want to explore too deeply the other person. We think we know. So if such complexities are tackled, I think we become better in our cross-border, cross-cultural thinking, evolution, practices. And lastly, as Justice Call already mentioned, maybe allow different cultures to produce their own competencies, their own standards. And as Mr. Chandeok said, there is differences within 10 kilometers of each other. So let's appreciate those differences. Let's welcome them, treat them complex. My last comment, ma'am, I would not be where I am today in the US. First of all, thanks to my father, who's also listening today, a very strict teacher he was and he is. I would not be here without hard work. There is no shortcut. So some of us, if you're young minds, you're listening to this and you're thinking, within 6 months, within 2 months, I'll become a terrific cross-cultural mediator. Just notice that it takes traveling to many different cultures, different ethnicities, different nations to be able to observe and then absorb what culture is. I hope this was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Simran. That was indeed a deep answer, and it came straight from the heart. I would say it came straight from your cultural soul, and that's what we admire about the friend in you, how you carry your own identities, which are so many, and respect the identities of everyone else around you. And so I think that was a very important aspect that you have flagged today, of all of us learning from each other, and also learning from each other's cultures, but at the same time.
Anaji, if I may add,
Yes.
I'm always say I'm very proud to be Indian first and American second. I will never ignore the fact that I was born in India, that I'm proud to be Indian, that everything or most of the things I know came from India. And I need to carry it every day. If I abandon that thought out of some fear, out of some fashion, out of some comfort, then I'm wrong and I am lying to my core, as you rightly said. So just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Beautiful. That's what Gandhiji said, his universal message can never be forgotten. And I think not a day goes by when I am reminded of what he said about culture. He said, open the windows of your house, your homes, open the doors. Let the winds of culture from all over the world flow into your home so that you learn from them. But never forget that you are standing on your 2 feet and stay that way. Don't lose your balance. So thank you so much, Sukhsimran. That was that was profound.
Aloysius, after these wonderful inputs from the Galicia speakers that we have here, looking at the final question to you, looking at your academic achievements, which are available for everyone to see on Google, and your practical experience of on-hand mediations you have participated in, should the purity of facilitative mediation be retained? Should evaluative mediation not be recognized as a completely different activity from mediation, like early neutral evaluation?
Sukh Simranjit is already laughing at me before I say anything. So yes, it's okay. Right. So
I was smiling at the cross-cultural question posed to
Yeah.
you. I'm looking forward to your answer.
no. So I mean, look, I I got this from somewhere, right? A pure facilitative mediator, a pure evaluative mediator, and a 10-year-old Mensa genius were enrolled in a mediation competition. And the question is, who won? And the answer is the 10-year-old Mensa genius won, because the other two are academic myths. What is a pure facilitative mediator? It's, you know, even Riskin has the person who created the grid that differentiated evaluative and facilitative mediation has tried many times now to explain that these categorizations were purely for academic discussion. And I have met thousands of mediators from all continents now, maybe except Antarctica. In practice, mediators are somewhere in between these two extremes. And this is out of practical necessity, you know, because at an extreme, both the evaluative and facilitative approach is flawed. Evaluative mediators look at facilitative ones and they mock us, right? They say that, look, it's inefficient, it's toothless. You know, if you from your experience can see a way to help the parties to get the problem resolved, then why are you not using it? And if the parties know that you are not going to be questioning some of their arguments, then how will you incentivize them and encourage them to prepare and substantiate some of their demands, some of their requests? And of course, from the facilitative point of view, we are worried. You know, we are worried that, look, if the parties knew that I'm going to be evaluative, then wouldn't they come with an adversarial mindset? Wouldn't an evaluative mediator reduce the self-determination of the parties? And because we want to encourage them to devise their own solutions. And like Riskin has noted, and many other practitioners have noted, this is a false dichotomy. You know, if we get ourselves dragged into this binary thinking that we have to choose either evaluative or facilitative, then we forget that premise of respect, which unites all mediators. Facilitative mediators use a lot of evaluative techniques during our work. Reality checking, reframing, all that can only be done when there is some amount of analysis and assessment that the facilitative mediator is doing. Evaluative mediators use a very facilitative method of inquiry to build rapport with the parties and to understand their underlying concerns, so that when they do make an evaluation, the parties believe in it and they accept that it's feasible. And the truth is, between evaluative and facilitative mediation, the lines will continue to be blurred. I actually think that it's a good thing that they continue to be blurred, because the good international mediators that I have learned from, that I have encountered, have shown me that when you learn to respect the different philosophies of mediation from the different cultures, which have evolved because of the context that they operate in, then you learn when and how to be evaluative, facilitative, or transformative. And I think so. This is one method which I have now encountered in my practice. It is a new approach and variously called directive or constructive mediation, where the mediator is sensitive to the fact that the parties will demand, but there are underlying interests, to the fact that we need to also help parties to restore trust because it's a contract. And what holds people to contracts more than the convention, more than legislation, is trust. But the directive or constructive mediator also knows that if I have mediated hundreds of cases, thousands of cases, and I know a way that I can help to word the apology, I can help to let them share how to word apologies. I can help to let them know maybe there's this forms of installment payments that can go towards debt repayment, that can go towards alleviating the insolvency. Then if I can get the parties prior consent and they know that they are not bound by my guidance, then I should be prepared to share from my experience. And the point simply is, if I can summarize, is that the field of conflict resolution has evolved greatly since evaluative and facilitative mediation was categorized. We are now dealing with hybrid protocols, up, met, up. Neutral evaluation is itself somewhat of a hybrid protocol. All this have evolved because there are new understandings on cognitive biases, on negotiation behaviors. I think we need, as mediators, to learn to move with a lot of humility and flexibility to embrace this new understandings of psychology, of cognitive behavior, and craft an approach which can embrace more approaches rather than to create walls around our practice.
Thank you, Aloysius, for bridging this gap between different forms. So beautifully explaining the blurring boundaries so well. Thank you so much. I'm sure the listeners would have benefited from your, the experience that really shows from what you've said. We come to the end of the session. Sadhana?
Yes, with this, much as we would have liked to go on, but our time is really up. And thank you so much, Justice Kaul, Mr. Chandiok, Aloysius, Sukhsimran, for this very, very fascinating discussion on this historic day when we are signing the MOU. Before I request Justice Kaul for his closing chairperson's address, you all have the MOU before you, Justice yes. Mr. Chandiok, Sukhsimran, and Aloysius. May I request all of you to simultaneously sign it, please, and then we will amalgamate the document. Thank you. And congratulations to SAGE, to Maadhyam, and to STRAUS. Here's to a great journey ahead.
Thank you,
for the opportunity.
Justice Kaul, we now invite you for your final word on the session as the chairperson.
So the judge always gets the last word, so I get what I would say is the two things I carry from what Aloysius said and Dr. Sukhsimranjit Singh said. One is what Aloysius said is trust. And I think that's the crux of any resolution or dispute. There has to be a trust. The other is what Sukhsimranjit Singh said was that the human race is one, but we may be having different cultures, different systems, different parameters of understanding, sometimes different value systems. So therefore, when you start doing it cross-country as you want to do it, those factors will have to be both built into it. You have to build in a system of trust, and you have to take those nuances into account, because people world has become a smaller place. So people from India have gone all over the world. People from all over the world have come to India. You are having a specter of a vice president in the US who's a classic example of cross culture. Now, in this scenario, everybody carries that little bit, as he says, of his own values, add to the values of the different system. So there is a similarity in pattern in sense of being more cross-culturally aware and having different value systems, but there is a core thing which arises. So if you want to settle it internationally, I think you will have to take that account. And so far as India is concerned, I feel we are more varied than the whole of Europe combined together.
Yes.
If you in terms of culture, in terms of food, in terms of habits, the variance would be more than a whole of Europe combined together. So that's itself an example. So whether we do it nationally or we do it internationally, these smaller systems which have to be taken care of. The second aspect I would emphasize is there is very little option other than trying to settle disputes through a mediation process. I think US is a classic example of what it is shown. Singapore the system works there in a manner where they don't have that enormity of the problem which is there, and therefore that's not an issue. But in the Indian context, I think we can otherwise keep talking about years together and decades together and centuries together of ending litigation. It's not going to happen, and therefore we must work in a manner with trust and cross-culturally. Otherwise, I would only end by saying that the classic example, mythologically or historically, whichever way you look at it, of a failure of mediation is the Mahabharata. That is what it wrought. When mediation failed, when Sri Krishna Bhagavan tried it and it did not work, the destruction it wrought as a failure of mediation is what I think systems will see or the world will see with more difficult times in the post-COVID phenomena. Unless we are able to develop it, we have to avoid that. And I think you've done a wonderful job in putting together this organization. Wish you all the best and hope to see you do more and more mediation. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, my lords. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sukhsimran. Thank you, Aloysius. Thank you, Sadhana and JP, for carrying out the day. Thank you, everybody, and congratulations to all participants, and thanks to everybody.